That's the way you can actually see if you've got a bacterial problem, is you can cut the stem, put it in water, and those little squiggly weird lines coming out, that's bacterial ooze. True story, folks. So it's kind of a weird thing, but so those are what signs are. Well, what's a symptom? Symptoms are the visible response to what's happening from the sign. So it's a response of a plant to biotic and or abiotic factors that result in a change or abnormality in the plant. So something like yellowing or leaf tockling or wilting or...
Hey, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast. All things cannabis and lifestyle related, brought to you by the people at 5-8 Distribution.
The wonderful folks here at 5-8 Distribution. Thank you for
family.
Being the 5-8 family.
We're back today. We're here to talk about IPM, integrated pest management. You know, it's funny because I thought about it as we were lining this out.
Sure.
And as much as that's the generic term we use, it's really integrated pest and pathogen management.
Well, and the more I actually looked into when I was putting it together, there is that, even that, some will talk about it in relation to deficiencies, and some will talk about it, in relation to physical barriers, chemical control, all this different things.
Mold is such a huge part of it, though.
Yeah.
So
and again, like you said, pests and diseases. So you don't really think about like that end of it, which a lot of it's cultural controls.
There's so many different things. And then diagnosing problems using signs rather than symptoms.
I don't want to tie those things together, right?
Yeah, they do go together.
And classically, and we'll get into this obviously, but classically, people diagnose plant problems based on generalized reactions of a plant, which are actually symptoms and not what's really going on. But we'll get into that. A little bit of a taste of that. But why don't you?
First off, I want to call out anyone who's working in a commercial grow that wants to try any of the stuff that we talk about on the show. We're here for the home growers too. So
this show or any other of our shows, whether we mention it or not, for the record.
You guys know Jayhawk from appearing on a bunch of different other podcasts. So if you ever hear us talking about whether it's the lights, the silica, the NewMill, the Scietetics, the cocoa, the IPM,
anything under that 5-8 umbrella,
just reach out.
Talk about,
dude. We're happy to help you guys out. Us being growers, me having worked in commercial facilities, we definitely know how it goes. The proof is in the pudding. And so we definitely always want to throw it out there. If you see anything that we talk about that you want to get in your hands,
we want you.
Not for nothing. We're Jug Dealers.
we're trying to deal with thugs. And, on that note too, guys, be looking out and be on the lookout for JugDealers.net. That will be our landing page dropping by the end of the month. Correct, Grambo?
Yes,
want to give us a little update, a little sneaky on that?
We are going to be, and not only some of this is going to be available, you'll be able to go to the website. For you YouTube viewers, this is going to be available right in the YouTube. You're going to be able to buy jugs right in the YouTube app. It's going to be kind of crazy.
I'm efficient jug dealing. Am I right,
I'm
folks?
integrating it into every direction, boys.
Which, by the way, you'll still be able to get it at your favorite stores. It's,
absolutely.
Yes.
And this is, the fact of the matter is there's less and less stores that are available. There's bigger
more
gaps.
what we're running into.
We're trying to fill in the gaps.
Certain people
can't get it.
hit us up and they're like, hey, it's 50, 100. They're in the next state away type situation.
There's still people out in prohibition land that still go, like we take going to the hydro store for granted. Some people still don't like going to the hydro store. They'd rather have it shipped.
You know 100%. What? There's a really good point to that. And who are we so, ignorant to think that our retail and our business wasn't going to be affected? Look, online sales was already a big thing before COVID. Then COVID kicked it right in the what, okay? And when was the last time you went to a shoe store, Gabe? I literally can't tell you.
I go to shoe stores just because I'm into the. I didn't wear the right shoes today.
Gabe's old.
And SBs and stuff, but not for nothing. If you can't get the SBs, the only place you're getting them is at the online shoe store.
But again, and to my point is you totally understand the reference. It's like, dude, a lot of this stuff is just done more online these days.
100%.
And more people are doing that. So we're always going to have a competitively priced in the stores where you can go in the stores, you can get it there for a good price. You can avoid things like shipping as well. Obviously, if they have it in stock. So that's always going to be the preferred method.
Well, not for nothing.
Your local jug dealer, because we're jug dealers.
Well,
but your local jug dealer as well. We want you to keep supporting them. Go on.
And not for nothing with those guys, you had the thing that's the benefit to the stores. You talk about the cultivates, the hydrocultures, the growers' paradises, and stuff like that. You get knowledge. Well, you get knowledgeable guys behind the counter that have used it. That Urban Roots is a perfect example.
Great example.
He can say, hey, I know 5 different growers who are using this stuff, and sometimes you go in the store and you bump into the grower who is using it.
So if you're fortunate enough to still have a local hydro shop that is the number one still operating, and I do mean that is still operating, and if you're getting quality information, by all means, we suggest you still go through there. For all the other gaps that are there in between, we are going to have easier availability, more direct availability through our website, et cetera. So that all being said, I'm actually very excited for it.
Let's dive into IPM.
Let's get into that. Graham, you want to roll that up a little bit there, buddy? Okay, so just kind of as an outline, right? So what we're going to want to do is define things first, and then beyond that, talk about examples. I want to delve into a little bit once we get to the end here and talk a little bit about your experience in commercial, because it's a little bit different. One thing using 25B things at home and being, safe, or even like a reluctance to use, let's say, a sulfur burner at home or something like that.
Well, and just
as opposed to commercial.
Well, and the fact that you have to fill out pesticide application logs. You have to deal with the state. You have to deal with inspections.
Hold on. You mean that label's actually a legally binding document and you pay attention to it?
I mean, something.
Holy cow.
Well, and something that I'm, when I'm operating in a commercial facility, something that I'm extremely stringent about, everything you do is on camera in those buildings.
Sure.
And one of the things that people, I think, take for granted the most is the fact that every time you apply a pesticide or you apply any product to your plants, as far as something to deal with pest pathogen management, the first thing you're supposed to do is read the label.
Literally.
Every single time. Doesn't matter if this is something that you use
it doesn't
every
matter
single
if it's
day.
the first or the 100th time. You're literally supposed to read it every time.
And when you're on camera, if you're not doing these things, you're violating straight away. And the other thing I think people take for granted is you really have to go in and read the nuts and bolts, because
in different, PPM, obviously it's a big thing. We're not going to focus on that. We talked a little bit more about that in the Zach BioSafe episode.
Yep.
He was real big.
It's not even the PPM. It's more the like some pesticides you need to wear a special type of rubber.
Sure.
And it's crazy.
Or re-entry intervals and things like that.
And
again,
those things.
Once you get into commercial, that changes that. A lot of these things, a lot of the hardcore stuff clearly isn't going to be used in, home production and some of the things that we're going to talk about.
But you still don't want to take those things for granted.
No, not at all.
And that's more my point, is the fact that you don't want to take these things for granted, because they are, look, they're products that are meant to suppress something.
Well, right. And that's okay. So we're going to get right into this too. And like you said, this is about suppressing, but also using other methods rather than just chemical means. So what is integrated pest management, also known as IPM? Obviously, we're just using that, as, given the old initials, keeping it nice and straightforward. Okay. Integrated pest management, or IPM, is a process you can use to solve pest problems while minimizing risks to people and the environment. And I really like to emphasize that, minimizing risk to people and environment. So that's going to be considered, what do you do in environmental? What are you doing as far as different sprays? Are you affecting predatory insects? Are you affecting bees? Are you affecting human health? Things like that, right? IPM can be used to manage all kinds of pests anywhere in urban agriculture and wild and natural areas. Why? Because it's truly an idea, right? So it's a concept, right? It's a concept. So even if you're talking about, just as an example, even though I hate when they go out and spray for mosquitoes in Fort Collins, for example, they're not spraying every day. In fact, they're trapping and they're keeping track of numbers before they decide eventually, okay, we need to chemically control this, right? Well, and then they do it at night and these things to try and mitigate that risk. And it just falls in line with the definition.
Well, and a lot of times when you do the biologicals, when you're dealing with like a copert or an arbico, you actually set up schedules with those guys.
Oh, absolutely.
And the thing
they're very involved in that process.
Yeah. And they're, I'll say for both companies, they're fantastic in actually helping you along, but also, you need to get your order in Tuesday so that it ships on Wednesday. So it'll be there the following week. And realistically, you have to lay out a whole program, and regardless of whether you're doing it at home or on a large scale, you definitely want to make sure that you're releasing things in, proper time.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, and that's the other thing. It gets pretty interesting when you talk about predatory insects too, about it having to have its particular environment that they need to be able to reproduce, to actually be able to do anything.
Well, and like the spider mite's a perfect example. Spider mites like it hot and dry.
Sure.
And a lot of the predators that you use for spider mites like it
hot and dry.
Well, not as hot and dry, but they like it a little more humid.
Sure. Okay.
You know what I mean? So when you pump up that humidity, not only are you helping the predators, you're slowing down the spider mite as well, which is going to...
Which again, if you think about integrated pest management, right, that's hitting it on two different sides. It's hitting it from the environment and it's hitting it from a predatory insect, a biological aspect.
Well, and it's funny, I can't remember exactly which predators they are, but there are certain predators that eat the bug. Certain predators eat the egg.
And then there's just parasitic insects that'll even like literally, lay eggs inside, of its victim. I mean, that's what's really interesting about it. And again, that's why I love really talking specifically about like what this is, so I'll even get into it a little bit more, right? IPM is an ecosystem-based strategy, right? So thinking about it again, as a full ecosystem, a full circle, it focuses on long-term prevention of pests or their damage through a combination of techniques such as biological control, habit manipulation, modification of cultural practices, and the use of resistant varieties, right? And all those things are incredibly important, all pieces of the puzzle. Pesticides are used only after monitoring indicates they are needed according to established guidelines and protocols. Treatments are made with the goal of removing only the target organism, right? So we're not trying to affect all these other, whether we're talking about whether it's bees, predatory insects, things like that. We're trying to just affect what's going on, which is also, so part of that is obviously identification, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Pest control materials are selected and applied in a manner that minimizes risks to human health, beneficial and non-target organisms, and the environment. So obviously, it is right there telling you this is a systems-based concept that is not by any means one size fits all.
Well, and a lot, it definitely, it is definitely situationally. You're going to have to adapt. And not only are you going to have to adapt, you have to deal with the fact that what might have worked in Oregon isn't going to work in Colorado and isn't going to work. A lot of times it's funny, you and I have talked about environmental control for powdery mildew here in Colorado.
Right.
And for the longest time, people have used kind of, I'm going to run my rooms at 35% and that's going to be powdery mildew. But that doesn't account for the fact that you're still going to get that spike in the middle of the night, right before the lights come on. And really that's what's causing your powdery mildew more than you keeping it at 35%, and a perfect example is if you've lived long enough here in Colorado, that like we see powdery mildew outside here.
Right.
You'll have it down at like 10, 15%.
Well,
you know what I mean?
So
that's where it's comical when you see
there, right?
And so what I recommend to people a lot of times is keep your temperature the same day and night. Or at least, again, working with Phil Haig for years, one of the things he always said was keep it within 4 degrees. So if you're at 85 at night or 85 during the day, you really don't want to go below 81 at night.
Sure.
80. And while that seems counterintuitive, you get a lot of people who are like, you need the cold at the end to make them frost up. Guess what? We got something for that. It's called winter frost.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's
not something that is,
sure.
I'm not saying it's not a thing, but
it's a thing. But I also think, like anything, there's cheat codes and hacks these days for everything, right? This is just easier to do. It's basically getting those effects, getting that senescence initiation in a bottle and doing it without having to do those extras environmentally affecting so much.
The biggest problem people have is actually obtaining that environmental control. It's funny because you and I always talk about the pyramid. We're always lighting, environment, genetics.
Sure.
And we always say lighting and environment is at the top. And realistically, one of the best forms of IPM is having healthy plants.
Well, that's, I think that was one of the things we were, I don't know whether I was talking about it on this or some other podcast, whatever, but, really talking about that. That was what was so interesting to me when I first went to school for horticulture and focused on more of the organic end of things. I didn't want to learn all the pesticides. I didn't want to touch all this shit. You know what I mean? I literally was like, so that's what kind of got me into organic production. And then you realize really quickly, it's about raising really healthy plants.
Elevated bricks levels.
That it can fight
silica.
Themselves, right?
Yeah, the silica is a perfect example. And if you make it harder for the bug to penetrate through the cell wall, eventually they can't feed themselves.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Again, It's about really focusing on raising healthy plants. And even like in my garden, I'm not going out and spraying a bunch of pesticides. I'm letting the war be waged. I'm letting I'm using umbel flowers and letting my basil flower out and letting things happen to and putting in marigolds, these beneficial insect attractors, actually bringing the things to deal with.
Beneficials are where it's at. They're the employee that works 24 hours a day, baby.
It is. But you have to have an understanding of their life processes, right? And also understanding things just as basic as a larva is going to eat 10 to 1 what the adult, is going to do. The adult at that point, that's all about reproducing. That's about
a lot of people use
sexual production.
Mature ladybugs, and I like the midges a lot because they're voracious.
Well, the whole thing is you have to you release the adults, but the adults then have to lay eggs. They have to be comfortable enough to stay around to then lay eggs, to then lay those midges, because they're going to eat. That's what goes out and assassinates aphids. So that's a perfect example of, they are the employees that keep working 24/7, but you still have to make sure your environment is conducive to keep them around so that then they reproduce and actually do their job, right? So it's very interesting, right? And again, IPM focuses on long-term prevention of pests.
It's a principle. It's a lifestyle.
Concept. It's a lifestyle.
And you have to pound it into your employees' heads.
Oh man,
you have to.
It's
live
a whole thing. It's a whole thing. And what we're doing is we're with that prevention of pests or their damage by managing, the ecosystem with IPM. You take actions to keep pests from becoming problems, such as growing a healthy crop, just like you said right there. And I think that's truly first and foremost. That can withstand pest attacks using
high bricks levels, also things like silica,
also disease resistant plants.
Yeah,
knowing your genetics, right? If you got something that's just shitting powdery mildew, which I've had those varieties, I'm sure you've had them too. And then you found out what your cedar plant was, if you will. You got rid of that. You got your environment in check, right? You did some prevention, and now you could get rid of it, but you couldn't get rid of it when you had the one in there.
It was funny. I watched the guys at the Emerald Cup put out a video, I want to say like 2018, 2019. And these guys had done some testing, and it was like a silver pearl, or it was an old school strain. And they had released spider mites into this room, and spider mites would not mess with this one plant. They were all over these other plants.
Right. You could almost use like a trap plant.
And so they actually talked about extracting,
or indicator at very least.
Well, they talked about extracting that plant and then spraying the essence on other plants to use it as like a kind of a deterrent for spider mites. So it was
essence. Could you define essence there? I've never heard of that.
I mean, they literally, I guess they extracted the terpenes and cannabinoids from it and kind of figured out some way to solubilize it.
And then they use it as a spray application.
And I mean, that's, when Jaron and I talk about it, like there is a lot of it where you need to pick out cultivar that are either going to outgrow the pests. They're just going to be so, vigorous, or, ones that, quite frankly, the pests. Now, that being said, the thrip that a lot of people see on a lot of the plants that are around, and that's such a tough situation, because for the longest, no states I think have allowed anybody to use spinosad. So you have to use some other products, in which we have ours, but there's not a lot of products on the market for thrips. But that thrip is a Western onion thrip.
Can I ask Gabe what product is that we use for thrips?
Well,
I mean, what you want to use is spinosad for sure, and that's a natural occurring soil bacterium.
But
and I believe we can still use it here in Colorado. Monterey Garden Spray, it's still in it.
Yeah, you can't, dude. I don't think there's any states. And the thing that always
anyway, there's definitely
as far as for registered for pesticide, registered pesticides for cannabis.
Sure.
For
cannabis, I don't think so.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I understand that a lot of our listeners are probably cannabis listeners. So
thanks, Gabe.
So in that respect,
Captain Obvious,
you have to have. I mean, it's got to be on the registered list.
I would also just go to Home Depot and give me some Monterey Garden Spray by some thrips.
But
and as you mentioned, it is a Western onion
commercial garden.
No, you can't. But we also have a lot of, to your point, we also have a lot of listeners that don't necessarily work in commercial gardens.
Right. I mean, dude, I use it at home, so I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to.
But you're right. I don't think anywhere. I'm pretty sure nowhere with cannabis can you use it commercially, and it is the Western onion thrip, which is a gnarly bugger.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is, it really likes GMO. It really because it's a Western onion thrip.
Sure.
It likes the chems. It likes all that stuff. So
is that because it's actually attracted to its like terpene profile?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you gotta-
Western onion thrip.
Well, and you got to think about it like these essences that are put on, essences as I'm using it, can be these different aromatic compounds that are put on, which might be a little bit more accurate. But what they, we know them to be pollinator attractors. So they could be deterrents or attractors for that matter.
So I don't know. I'm sure you know about these, Grambo. I'm not sure if you are aware, but
I'm here to learn, baby.
It reminds me of the peonies. If you know anything about peonies, a peony is a flower. But
nice
the way that it blooms is there's a sugar that coats the bud, and ants climb up the stem and they eat the sugar. And when they eat the sugar, that releases it so the flower opens. We had it when I was a teenager. I used to work with my stepdad he did landscape architecture, and we had a lady, and she's like, my peonies will not bloom. And we're like, okay, well, what's going on? And she goes, well, there's all these ants all over them. And so I spray the ants because I don't like the ants on the flowers.
Right.
And meanwhile, like we were saying, there's lots of things that are attracted.
Right. Ants will also take and use aphids and farm aphids.
Yep.
Take them all over the plant, have the aphids tap in. They farm aphids. They'll tap in, and then the aphids, they're frass or shit, whatever you want to call it. It's called honeydew, right? Nice name
but
for
it's
it.
Sweet.
It's sweet.
they call the poo frass honeydew.
Honeydew. That's true story.
That's a real thing.
Marketing.
So when you're parked under an elm tree or something like that, and you come out here, what the hell's all this sticky shit all over it? That's honeydew.
Yep.
Undoubtedly, there's a ton of aphids somewhere above you that are just raining down honeydew.
Is that will we consider that a sign or a symptom?
We're gonna get into that. We're gonna
foreshadowing.
Hey.
Now, before that, though, let's just wrap up. Let's wrap up IPM in here a little bit. And this is a point that I really again wanted to make. Rather than simply eliminating the pests, which seems to be easy to do, but really that's more conventional thought processes. That's conventional thought processes. Rather than simply eliminating the pests you see right now, using IPM means you look at environmental factors that affect the pest and its ability to thrive. So you're really looking at that point. You're trying to look at the pest on, and that's why really when you get into entomology and things like that, why you're learning about the plant's the insect's life cycle, so that you can know how to affect it. Because you break the life cycle, you break the insect, right?
See, the thing
that's really important, and that's why even something as simple as because insects' most important thing is water retention. Okay, so if you nick the exoskeleton, for example, do you remember the place out of Oregon that used to sell all the predatory insects? There was a place.
I've pretty much dealt with Coper and Arbico. I'm trying to think, but
anyway, it's a small club that actually provides these kind of predatory insects. There's not a lot of people that do it.
No, most of them come out of Europe.
Yeah. Which it's like
that's what they. I mean, that's why you need a week in advance to get them.
Totally. Totally. Yep. So obviously, chemical control is an example. Pest trapping is an example. Resistant varieties, as we mentioned, is an example. Cultural and environmental controls, which I do like to focus a lot on. You know what I mean? Because washing correctly, right? Washing between cuts, things like that. Obviously, we're pretty familiar with the detrimental effects of hop latent, right? And even just regular bleach isn't going to do anything with that one. So you got to go through. So I've been hearing people using Physan.
Yeah.
Just because it's that whole bactericide.
Honestly, I mean,
viruside, everything else.
People think the way that Mango does it is pretty nuts, but I actually kind of agree with him. And
what does he do?
He uses a different pair of scissors for every plant.
For every single plant.
As far as for cloning.
Sure.
I don't think
that's extreme.
I mean, here's the thing people need to understand as well. Like, it's transported through the water. So if you have ones in the dome and you have a real wet, misty dome, guess what, dude? Like, they're going through the rest of those plants. If there's any water in the bottom of the tray, once they get roots and they're all touching it, they all have it.
Yeah. So,
I like that. I mean, it's just one of those. Honestly, that's an interesting one because, that technically was kind of the plant dudding that so many of us kind of talked about for years.
That was what it was originally called.
I had a lot of people be like, that's a triploid or a diploid. And it's, it's different genetic code. I've seen all kinds of explanations for it.
I've seen it. And interestingly enough, it's funny that you mentioned that.
But it seems like we worked through it pretty quickly. And if you have the right protocols, you can get it dealt with. And a lot of people were saying with tissue culture that you can kind of get through it as well.
You can, but you have to go several generations. I will say it's very, it
takes
multiplies
time.
very fast. It takes
but
time.
if your genetics are that valuable,
then it's not even a question.
Then you're doing
I've
it.
seen it even in the GG4, which what we're going to talk about. That's actually our strain of the day today is GG4. And I have seen it myself on that plant that I still grow out, I've seen weird whole plant and I've seen weird arms. Again, the latent aspect of it, man, it's that's a wild one. But
I think a lot of people don't realize that cannabis is related to the hop plant. So,
Yes, it is. They're both out of Cannabis family. So well put. Okay. I wanted to define a couple little things. Could you move that up a little bit, Grambo? I wanted to, after we've talked about culture control, biological control, things like that, I want to just kind of define these super fast for you guys. So what is cultural control? It's a non-chemical management of pests using manual or mechanical means to change the soil and crop environment to discourage pest establishment. So that can even be like no-till practices. That can be cleaning up debris from a harvest, things like that. So you're not allowing that type of environment that pests are going to grow in. So it can be a lot of different things, right? Biological control, we've talked a lot about that. More or less, it's using predatory or parasitic insects, more or less what we call beneficials, good bugs, things like that. And chemical control, I'd say that's fairly obvious, but it involves use of pesticides in the management of pests. Again, we're using that as a last result, right? So in conclusion, the main purpose of integrated pest management is to prevent unacceptable levels of pest damage. And I like to make that point too, right? There's thresholds. You know what I mean?
I mean, you look at lettuce, broccoli,
there you go.
Any of those things. There's, I think,
and it's real numbers.
Well, a head of lettuce, I think, is allowed like 50 aphids per head.
Not 51, folks, or whatever. But there's a threshold.
Well, and not for nothing, much like most of the products you see, they're only inspecting a couple. They're grabbing a couple out of there. They're looking at them, and they're not going through every head.
100%. It's the law of averages on that.
Yes. And so, like with anything, there's, and I will say as well, a lot of the levels that you see in commercial cannabis nowadays, 10,000 CFU, that's colony forming units as far as mold, mildew, what's the mold, mildew, anaerobic.
There you go.
But any of those, 10,000 CFU, which again, if you look at some of the thresholds for some of the fruits and vegetables, it's like 30, 50,000 CFU.
And some of them are as low as like a zero threshold, which is not even real life.
States like Massachusetts.
Michigan, I think, is pretty tight as well on biologicals.
Massachusetts is by far the most stringent.
Yeah.
I mean, Massachusetts, and that's the other thing too. When you're looking at this, I always talk to people like I'm looking at it from a commercial scale because that's where the majority of my experience.
That's where your experience comes from.
But depending on the state you're in, it's going to be very, very, very specific as far as the products you can and cannot use. When you're back,
educate yourself. That's very important. I'm glad you bring that up because you really do have to.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, again, the perfect example is what happened in Massachusetts with a couple cultivators getting fined $300,000 for using Clonex.
Which you would think is an innocuous, and you're not a big deal. It's cloning solution.
Well, and you're saying to yourself, how many different products do I use that have indole-butyric acid? A long time ago, for years and years and years, I used Hormex.
Sure.
And Hormex hasn't been approved in any of these states because I believe on the label it says not for food use. And so because of that, and because people are selling trim to companies that are making edibles, it's not on the label.
It's not on the,
and Hormex, and here you have Hormex, you have Clonex, you have all these different products they all have indole-butyric acid. You're looking at them and you're like, dude, this, as far as the bottle looks, it's the same. Most of the people I know that are up in Massachusetts are using aloe.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, if you want to be safe. So, I mean, and again, in terms of IPM, what we're trying to do again is prevent unacceptable levels of pest damage, minimize that risk to people, property, infrastructure, natural resources, environment, and just reduce the evolution of the pest resistance. And that's why we're using chemical control as the last means, because we are trying to reduce or even eliminate that resistance to pesticides and other management practices.
Well, and understanding that there's no one silver bullet, and
integrated. I think is really important.
You want to rotate things. One of the practices that I used to do quite a bit was, I'd come in with a spray, and let's say I knew my bugs are coming on a Wednesday, so I'll come through and spray on Tuesday, knowing I'm going to be wiping out my bad bugs and my good bugs.
Sure.
But I'm coming in with new good bugs. So the new good bugs are going to have a leg up because
now in a really
down.
good IPM program, you would be targeting the bad bugs while leaving the good bugs. But hey,
hopefully
that's ideal. That's not always real. That's not always real.
Well, and you have to understand the fact that
IPM graphic, Grambo, just so we can. So I really like this too. I think this is somebody that everybody can take home, and obviously knowledge. What the heck is the pest? What are their life cycles? We were talking about that. What are their natural enemies? You know what I mean? What's the growing area that we care about? The whole prevention aspect. Ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, right? I mean, that's why all these pesticides, including ours that we'll talk about, has a maintenance / prevention level, and then has a knockdown level, right? So it's one of those things where prevention is a great way to do things. Obviously, your practice, cleanliness, things like that, like you were talking about too. It's a big part of it.
But again, we can do everything in the planet. I'm going to say,
that's where observation comes in. I'm
going to say, even in the best gardens in the country I've been into, at some point something gets in there.
Hence, that's where number 3 is observation. You're constantly observing.
100%.
Step 4 being intervention. You see something, you move into it, and then step 5 evaluation and planning. So
more of my point is the fact,
big circle of life.
More of my point is the fact that you have 30, 50, 80 different employees coming into your building who have gardens at home, even if they're not cannabis gardens. They have this, they have that going on.
Just have a veggie garden, Gabe. Shouldn't be a big deal,
everybody,
right?
Not everybody with a commercial facility has an air shower, has this, has that, and not for nothing. Even if you do have an air shower and all that, sometimes they get through. So what's your threshold on your building as far as receiving? Do you have a quarantine?
Do you have a bathe? You're bringing stuff in. Yeah.
There's so many different facets.
What are your entry points? How many entry points do you have? I actually found this is when I went to Mangoes last week. I went to a spot in Sacramento. Very clean grow, obviously incredibly well done. Appreciate you guys for letting me in. Josh, Guy, Alex, all those guys. Appreciate that. But they had some signs out that were very honest about this. Like, hey, if you've been another cannabis grower within the last 12 hours, please do us a favor and don't come in. We feed our families with this. I mean, it was like, it was kind of a badass sign. I was like, wow, you know what I mean? They're being real upfront with it. And to your point, if you're reducing those entry points, but to sit here and thinking anybody that says, I don't have any bugs or I've never had any bugs.
Never had any. I mean,
come on.
Again, I don't know that I've been into a garden, including my own. I don't know. And I will say, when I was at Grassroots, we probably went about almost 2 years with no problems. And the reason we did is because we started everything from seed. You're not starting behind then. But I mean, and I'm not saying that the clones you always get are dirty. No, but eventually,
but think about it, Gabe. You're making it get in from somewhere, and you're making it go through those life cycles. It's just a time thing. Well, and even you're making it to finally get to where it's in the facility. Dude, it takes a lot longer than if it's already established.
My facility, both my facilities in Maryland and Pennsylvania, were both out in the middle of farm country.
There you go.
You know what I mean? It's
walk the edges of the property, right?
I mean, So it's just like for anyone to just, and I guess that's really where it starts is, you have to assume that you're going to have that pests are, if they're not already there.
I would basically just assume they're there. It's a better mindset for you.
Yeah.
It's just a better mindset for you.
It's kind of like when you get a clone from the homie. Like what's the first thing you do when you get a clone from the homie? You freaking spray it. He could be like, hey, dude, I swear to God, I haven't seen a bug in my garden in 6 months.
No, that's how you know you have the good homies. I had a friend send me some clones. I open up the box. There's 2 clones and a little thing of like spray to like make sure. It's like, thank you. JR token. Thank you, my friend.
JR. Class. Absolute class. Absolute class. So it's kind of the back end of this. And this is going to be pretty quick, but I did want to talk about signs versus symptoms because I feel like this is so often messed up. And I assume this is also something you probably educated in the facility, right? Yeah. Because somebody sees, and my favorite example, right? My favorite example. Well, actually, let's just talk about definitions first, and then we'll talk about my very favorite example of it. But like, the plant's yellow. Okay, let's start down the list, right? It's a general thing. So signs, okay, versus symptoms. Signs are the physical evidence of damage caused by biotic or abiotic agents, such as the pathogen itself, pests, spores, fruiting bodies, chemical residue, bacterial ooze, and so forth. So it's the insect itself. It's frass possibly from the insect. It's chewing, stuff from the insect.
Yeah,
it's real. It's real evidence of it. Or like even a leaf tissue analysis or a sap analysis, or like if you were to cut and see a bacterial ooze, because that's the way you can actually see if you've got a bacterial problem, is you can cut the stem, put it in water, and those little squiggly weird lines coming out. That's bacterial ooze. True story, folks. So it's kind of a weird thing, but so those are what signs are. Well, what's a symptom? Symptoms are the visible response to what's happening from the sign. So it's a response of a plant to biotic and or abiotic factors that result in a change or abnormality in the plant. So something like yellowing or leaf tockling or wilting or dieback, galls, blight, things like that. But again, general stuff, right? Like literally, interveinal chlorosis, is it yellow at the top versus yellow at the bottom? Are things mobile, not mobile? You're starting to play a whole guessing game. And that's where the danger really happens, is trying to diagnose off of symptoms versus signs. The problem is symptoms are very, very generalized. Therefore, similar symptoms can be produced in response to a different causal agent.
Well, I think you'll notice as we run through, our nutrient series, like, a lot of the definitions of the deficiencies are pretty similar.
Pretty damn similar.
Pretty damn similar. One of the big things you definitely have to look at is where it is on the plant.
That's very important.
That's going to be, one of your big indicators. And the other thing I always tell people is first time when anybody ever calls me and they goes, hey, I have a deficiency. I go, what's your pH?
Let's start there.
Because honestly, that's going to tell you a lot of what you need to know. What's your pH? What's your EC? Or parts per million, whichever way you decide.
And there's definitely first off, please, people, use the scientific standard. Use EC. I hate that so bad.
That gets Jaren's goal.
You talk about what gets me? It's fucking PPM. I'm just kidding. 500, 700, 500.
Yeah, that's so confusing.
EC.
Yeah.
But I like how you always hammer that into people's head, Gabe.
Yeah,
you're
it's
like,
the first. Yeah,
you're like, okay.
What's your pH?
So
under 5.6. Betting it's not a phos deficiency.
And here's, what was that? I was talking with somebody about this last week, but this is actually a term used in medicine. It's actually I was talking about on the road when I was in California last week. But it's a term used in medicine. I'm pretty sure we've talked about it before. But it's if you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. And what that means is odds are, and they use it in medicine for diagnosing issues, right? Looking at different symptoms and saying, hey, what the hell we think's going on here? But the mind naturally wants to go to these really weird and extreme and exotic places. Oh, it must have been this or it's that. And it's like, well, odds are it's actually something more simple right in front of your face. So our horses, right, is pH, EC, what's it coming out? In general, if you're feeding a 2 EC, I want to see it coming out at between 2.5, something like that would be pretty spot on. I want to see it coming out at a pretty similar pH as well. What's going in, I want to see basically coming out. If you see big number differences coming out in both the pH or EC variety, you've got some more internal problems. Now, my advice would be based on what we have is get yourself some Ruby Fulvic, do 10 mils a gallon, flush that shit through for 2 or 3 waterings, even 15, reset that thing, and you'd be surprised. We saved literally multi-million-dollar farms with that. But my whole point, going back in this is the use of symptoms alone is often an inadequate method for disease identification. And here's my favorite example. Plants that are underwatered, a hell of a lot like plants that are overwatered. So if you don't look at anything else and you just look at the plant and it's fucking, and it's completely over and it's toggled over and it looks like absolute dog shit, and you don't go and pick up the pot and you don't take a look and you don't go, hey man, what's going on here, or feel it or do anything else, well, that's a death sentence for the plant. You've literally just signed its death certificate and said, bye-bye. I might have been able to bring you back if I slowly let this watered out, even though I've completely ruined the root zone. Because again, and Josh and I were Graham and I were talking the other day, just the other end of photosynthesis being respiration. And that yes, plants take in, as far as the leaves, they take in CO2 and give off O2. Well, it's the flip-flop in the roots. right? So those roots are actually taking in O2
so much
and giving in. And that's why a plant terrarium works the way it does. It's already, the cycle's actually already built in there, right? But you have to have air in the root zone for that to happen. And actually that whole watering and then drying out process, that pulls new fresh air into the root zone, into the substrate.
That's why
right?
the smart pots are always so nice.
That's why Smart Pots is a great way to go. Shout out to Smart Pots, right? So bottom line, the protocols for correct diagnosis are based on signs rather than symptoms. Put simply, a sign is objective and a symptoms is subjective. I like that. I found that on the internet somewhere. I say, okay, so a sign is objective, meaning this is definitive. This isn't a guesswork. And a symptom is subjective, meaning, I don't know, that yellowing could have come from calcium, could have come from nitrogen. That wilting, as we just mentioned, could have come from overwatering, could have come from underwatering. So again, put simply, a sign is objective, a symptom is subjective. Take that one to the bank, folks. That is our, kind of our educational portion for this show. Go on, Gabe. What you got?
I was just saying, one thing I would say to folks is look at the rest of the plants in the garden. Are all the plants doing the same thing? Is this one plant doing the same thing?
Funny, I had that exact thing the other day. Yeah.
The memberberry, for instance, that thing obviously wants to be feeding at 2.5, 2.7 because it's just constantly hungry.
Right.
And so, the one thing I always say to folks is know your cultivar, because a lot of times, you could be dealing with something and you're like, hey, why is this one plant doing it? Whereas if the whole room's doing it, or even I've had it where I'm in a 2,000 square foot room and it's just one section of the room doing it. Then you look up and,
it's on the AC side.
There's a register. There's a register that's missing on that. We need a diffuser to kind of stop blowing on these plants. So again, and that's environmental.
I had a guy the other day, literally, he's like, man, this is the most aggressive plant I've ever grown, whatever. It's looking weird, everything else. I said, bro, it's deficient. You just need to feed it
it's
more.
hungry.
It's hungry. And none of the other plants are doing it, which I loved how you brought that up. So to me, I go, well, I don't think that there's a lockout issue. You're not seeing in other places. I don't think it's worth doing a reset on it. With that plant, just crank it up a bit.
Well, and I always, when I used to teach my guys in the buildings, you walk in the room and people would always look at me like kind of weird, but you walk in the room and you put your hands up. And you feel the moisture
between your fingers.
Yeah, you feel the moisture in the room, and then you look up and you look and see. You go, are all the fans on? Are all the lights on? But the first thing you do, it doesn't matter if it's your tent, it's your basement, or it's a 2,000 square foot room. You walk in that room and you scan that room and you go, hey, are there any plants that are droopy? Are there any lights that are out? Are there any fans that are going? Is there any water on the floor?
I like that. Right. Is there any water?
Dude, I could walk in my room, and if the floor was slick, I knew it had gotten to 70% humidity.
Sure.
And I could go back into GrowLink and I could be like, oh, okay. Because I would have it in my facilities that guys would show up to work about 10 minutes before the lights come on. So that way I want it so that in a commercial facility, I'm opening the door and the lights are coming on and my guys are right in there seeing the first thing that's happening, because realistically, if anything got weird, I can go back in my monitoring equipment, my cameras, any of that stuff and go, what happened last night? Oh, okay. I'm seeing right here. I was at 75% humidity for an hour right before, another thing I would notice is certain cultivar I've grown, they would be big and chunky and they'd have more just mold problems in general, in which we would change those watering practices and not water them late in the day so that they wouldn't be transpiring so hard, because it's just, and it's a know your cultivar situation where you're going to be adjusting different things that you do.
Of course.
To kind of
know your plants.
accommodate.
Can you bring up that graphic real quick too? The signs versus symptoms graphic, just to kind of knock this home. Obviously, sign, you got the powdery mildew on the lilac, pretty obvious, right? That's the actual pest or disease. And then if you're looking at the symptom, you've got that modeling. It's that mosaic, which mosaic is that's an actual plant term for kind of deficiency or the reaction, a symptom reaction from a plant. You have things like modeling or
not to
be
confused with what you see on the ChemD. me. 'Cause everybody's like,
Right, you get
Mark
some
of the
weird
beast.
Right. So anyway, wanted to hammer that home. You can very much see many other examples of science versus symptoms on your local interwebs. But that being said, let's get into current events in cannabis. I was able to pull up kind of a couple interesting ones today, and this actually piggybacks off of the UFC taking
everybody's
cannabis. Everybody's going, right? So now all of a sudden, NCAA panel formally recommends removing cannabis from banned substances list for college athletes. Lo and behold, they don't look at it as a performance enhancing drug. Can you believe that? Isn't that strange? So they, by no means are they encouraging it, or that's what they're saying. But, I actually saw, as a sidebar to this, they had something that said and I don't know how they figured this out. Granted, people could skew these statistics quite easy, but talked about like basketball scholarships in states with legal cannabis versus states without it. And it was like, turns out it's a hell of a lot easier to recruit to a cannabis state for basketball. But anyway, apparently it may not be a matter here real soon. So, I found that to be interesting. And this one was just kind of
between getting sponsored and being able to smoke weed, they're in good shape.
I would be definitely spending all 5 years. I want to
go back to college.
I'd be a victory lap for 6 just to make sure I was still, relevant.
And again, we heard our friend Eugene talk about it, the fact that he was scared to smoke weed in college because he didn't want a chance to losing out on millions of dollars, man. So it's like, and to know, I forget who I was just reading about yesterday, but there was another, big NFL athlete who came out and was like, "Hey, man, like this is the way I'm getting through is because, I don't have to take painkillers and stuff like that."
I think that's one of the things people always hear, pot's a performance enhancing a drug. And there's debate behind that, but what there's no debate in is recovery.
Yeah, it's definitely a recovery.
Inflammation reduction.
Definitely. And that's, I there were some other ones, and I thought maybe even the next episode, some other kind of interesting science ones that were delving into that a little bit more. But thought this one was interesting. The next one being, and I thought this was next. And go down just a little bit. Yeah, that was just a little bit of the next question. There we go. So this one, by the way, if you really keep reading, it's like kind of interesting. And then it ends with a, huh? Okay. Arkansas activists planned expanded 2024 marijuana ballot initiative for retail and full legalization of retail, but it's contingent and hinging upon federal legalization. So I found that to be interesting, right? So clearly it's a southern state that we know is very conservative, and they're basically saying, look, we're not doing anything. We're not opening up at all. They do have a medical program.
But again, election year, I won't be surprised if we see it. I won't be surprised if we don't see movement in the next year or two. But I won't be surprised if we see.
Well, and then we're at 24, like we've talked about, not at 25. That'll be interesting if that's going to be forced onto the floor. But this one, as you read into it a little bit more, I was a little bit like, ooh, this one just seems a little bit like not so nice. You know what I mean? But anyway, Arkansas, even the South, whether it's Arkansas, Mississippi, et cetera, they're all coming on. And in fact, then speaking of that and speaking of the South, we'll talk a little bit about where we're going to be. Actually, first, before that, we always want to talk a little bit about 5/8 products and use them in relation to obviously what we're talking about today. So as far as an IPM thing, I think it's pretty obvious. You already mentioned the big one, the silicic acid, the liquid insurance. So obviously we talked a little bit about last time about why it's superior, but why don't you go in a little bit about just about the monomers, et cetera?
Basically that monomer size particle, because it's not a dimer, trimer, polymer, it's going to stay in that monomer size. So it is the most available form of silica you can buy. You're going to see a lot of people out there selling cal silicate, selling all different types of potassium silicate. Yes, they all have silica. The question, as we always say, is whether or not it's in there, whether it's available.
Yeah, that's the big.
Is it soluble? Is it available? The biggest thing you'll see with a lot of people is because they're using these salts, they're getting this fallout and they're getting this gelling. And when you get this gelling sitting in the bottom of your barrel and the plant's not using
and really what it's trying to do is like so this stuff is
trying to go back to being sand.
Trying to go back to being sand. So gelling up, and it probably take a really long time, but literally that's essentially what it's trying to do. We do have a new bloom version that's coming out. Don't have a lot of information on it right now, but be watching out there. We will be sampling that out.
And for the budget conscious folks, You can foliar 2 mils a gallon.
Thank you.
I mean, I know one of the big things people were like, hey man, do I have to give it every time? No, a lot of times I'll say to people, you can use it every other time. I'm going to be honest with you. I use it every time.
I use it every single time.
I use it every single time.
Half a mil a gallon for the root zone. We'll use it first, even before CalMag.
And then the foliar at 2 mils.
2 mils a gallon.
Can I ask a newbie question about the foliar stuff? Does pH affect foliar at all? I wouldn't think it would, but I figure I got your guys' ears. Ask a newbie question.
I mean, here's the deal. I wouldn't be foliaring.
I wouldn't go to weird.
I wouldn't be foliaring at like below 4 or above like 8 or 9. But I mean, where are you getting this water anyway? If you're having water like that, like you have bigger issues that you need to look at.
As Gabe has astutely pointed out several times, and it's really a great observation, if you're dealing with a municipal water,
tap water,
it's a tap water, if you will, it's always going to be a little bit basic because they don't want it to be acidic, so it's not eating the pipes. So typically out of the tap, you're going to look at about 7.2. So even if you're using that Slicium at 0.5 mils a gallon, that's only going to pull it down maybe 0.1, 0.2 maximum. So it's going to be straight neutral at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking language is so funny. Like they've taken basic from us. So now we have to say alkaline because like, oh, these basic bitches out there doing this, So it's like, your water's basic, bro. It's alkaline.
My water's basic as fuck.
Yeah, basic AF over here.
Your water's ratchet, homie.
And in fact, as you mentioned, it is most effective as a foliar. It gets right to the spot, but again,
it gets in the stomata, and that's the biggest thing at 0.05 nanograms. It is the smallest particle.
Nanometers, yeah. Nanometers.
Yeah, nanometers. Yeah.
So it is small, being of that monomer size. That's why it's fully water soluble as well. Goes right in, goes up the xylem. So it jumps in because it's water soluble. It moves as mass flow. Goes right into the xylem. Up to the side, the silicon is deposited into the cell walls, and the rest, the hydrogen, the oxygen, they're attached to it as well, are given off as H2O as transpiration. Pretty straightforward relationship. Pretty cool stuff. So the other one we want to talk about is kind of our IPM within itself kind of thing, right? We have a trio.
The trilogy.
Yeah. The trilogy, right? You've got the EcoWorks, which is a cold pressed neem oil based insecticide, miticide, and nemicide and fungicide. Acts as a surfactant in our system. We use it in a 1-to-3 ratio to the multi or the russet. The multi.
So explain the 1-to-3 and I want people to understand this because the EcoWorks is the oil. So just if you're thinking about it,
right?
You always want to use less of the oil. So when we say 1-to-3, you're using the 1 of the oil, 3 of the other ones. On the oil, it's 5-to-15, as I remember. And on the other ones, it's going to be anywhere from 10-to-30.
5-to-15, and then I do, 10-30. Yeah. So that's going to be maintenance prevention. EcoWorks is always used, if you think about it like in a triangle, EcoWorks up here, and we'll put up a graphic.
And it actually acts as a surfactant as well.
Yes. And I really like to think about it, the surfactant, because it's like, why am I using it all the time? Well, it's a surfactant with a bunch of other beautiful properties. And in fact, it's got, because it's all natural virgin cold press, it's got a formulation. It does have actual azadirachtin in it, has hundreds of limonoids, which are phytochemicals that are abundant in sweet and sour scented citrus fruit and other specific plant families, including neem. Certain limonoids are anti-fedans, such as azadirachtin, as it turns out, from the neem tree. They also have fatty acids.
So what does that mean for people who are...
An anti-feedant? Well, that's going to make the insect not feed. So just like with water, if it's not eating, it's not going to be able to reproduce.
Exactly.
Yep. So it's going to die. But I also like to look at it as a little bit of a fuller feed as well, because there is some natural nitrogen and micronutrients in that EcoWorks as well. In fact, all other neem products that I know are chemically extracted. This is cold press extracted, all natural. Think of it as a surfactant. Use it in conjunction with the multi, which a multi is a proprietary mixture utilizing commonly found food-based ingredients recognized as a 25B exemption, meaning it's great to use at home. You can definitely use it commercially as well. Available in all 50 states. It's exempt from some of these other pesticide.
So basically that means for anybody who doesn't know out there, any of the heavy duty pesticides, especially when it comes down to petroleum based stuff, they all have a registration number with the EPA. When it's 25B, it's gone through a review process and it does not require
it's deemed safe for humans and
safe.
Doesn't.
Now that being said, again, in the commercial applications, just because you're using 25B doesn't mean you don't need to fill out a pesticide application log. Doesn't mean you don't need to wear the proper IPM.
It's still technically 20 or a pesticide. It's just a 25B pesticide.
It's just deemed, and a lot of times the IPM on these are relatively minimal.
And the beautiful part about it too, being 25B, that's one of the things that's specifically recognized as acceptable for IPM management practices because it is targeted and it's also of minimal risk to humans, like we said, right? The multi-recipe is exceptionally effective for thrips and fungus gnats, but it's not eliminated, eradicating and controlling mites, aphids, whiteflies, other soft-body insects in their various life stages, including eggs. It's a mix of cloves, rosemary, and thyme with a sodium lauryl sulfate as the emulsifier, right? That just keeps emulsifier, meaning it keeps everything properly mixed.
And realistically, you're going to look at that label. You're going to see other companies that have a similar, makeup of their products. The biggest thing that we always talk about when it comes to that is honestly the blending and the micronization of these products, because again, that's really what's going to make it work is how long it sticks to the plant and how well it works.
Sure. So again, using the eco in conjunction with the multi or the russet. If you're using 5 mils preventive of the eco, you're using 15 mils of multi or russet. Russet again is a proprietary mix utilizing commonly found food-based ingredients, just like the multi is. Also 25B, making it safe and effective for integrated pest management practices. Could you move that up a little bit, Grumbo? Exceptionally effective for russet and spider mites. The only thing I know of that actually has russet on the label, so kind of cool there, right?
Yep.
All life stages, including eggs. It's a mix of peppermint oil and sodium lauryl sulfate. A couple other little things in there as well. There's a little bit of alcohol in both of them as well. Things like that. So,
and remember, if whatever you're using, don't just rely on one product, especially when it's 25B. You want to be cycling through basically products with different active ingredients. I love because pests can develop resistance to 100%, these things.
Especially these. I mean? Now, this isn't your diatomaceous earth, for example. These are, they're acting in some ways as a pesticide. You're going to have less resistance on oils and things like this because of the way it works. A lot of times it's just covering up the plant, clogging up its pores and things like that, so it can't respirate. But anyway, the real important part is, as Gabe mentions, this is a great addition into any current IPM program, right? So this isn't the be all end all. This is literally, it's anybody can always use another good arrow in your IPM quiver. And that's literally what these products are. It's some more arrows in your well-placed and timed quiver, to kind of wrap up the whole IPM.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I say to folks a lot of times, it's not, the UV light is part of that program.
Sure.
Photocatalytic oxidation is part of that program. Using chlorine dioxide is part of that program. As we've discussed with Zach,
cultural practices, biological practices, all these things,
any one of these, the use of beneficial predatory mites, all of these things together, it's not just one thing. It never is.
It's never just one thing. It's never just one thing. So I do want to talk about our strain talk. And of course, as we do with our strain talks, we always post these pictures on Instagram. So you can go to our Jug Dealers Instagram to find the posted pictures. And we got some good ones. Honestly, some really nice, if I do say so myself.
And this is one of your favorites, right?
This is one of my favorites. Yeah. This is one of my all-time favorites. So this is Gorilla Glue. Whoa. I do go. Whoa. This is GG4. Formerly.
Gonna get us sued, bro.
Formerly Gorilla Glue or Original Glue. There is a real story to that. Am I right? That the Gorilla Glue company, right, actually
they were not thrilled with.
Yes, they didn't want to be.
They sued the fuck.
Yeah, they sued the hell out of it. Yeah, I mean, for lack of a better. I mean, I think they were kind of cool in the end, but they're basically like, hey, you got to change that. So anyway, GG4 these days. I still like to call it Gorilla Glue.
I worked in a dispensary where we changed the name to Sticky Ape.
Sticky Ape.
That's
what you got to do.
So we're reviewing Sticky Ape today, guys.
I've heard of worse name changes.
I've heard of worse. I've been called worse. Okay, Gorilla Glue. It's a hybrid weed strain made from an accidental genetic cross between, and we just know what was in the room. We don't actually know exactly what the genetics was, but there was Chem Sister in there, Sour Dove, and Chocolate Diesel in there. It's a multiple award-winning strain that has taken first place in both the Michigan and Los Angeles 2014 Cannabis Cup. And if you can believe that, that's a modern old strain. That's kind of one of those ones that ended up
like middle,
in the middle. Right. Yeah. It's not your old school Sour D, but it's by no means your new.
It came and went so quickly like that. I hate to say it. I mean, outside of Blue Dream, it was one of those first strains where people were like, oh, yeah, like you have bags of that? No, I'm cool.
It totally went the way of Blue Dream, but I'll be honest, I pull that out anytime anymore. And you look at some of these pictures that we're going to post, beautiful color. I mean, they are huge, resinous, sticky,
it's
flavorful
consistent. Like
buds.
when it comes to BHO,
I love it.
Dry returns, it's almost 25%.
Well, and it's one of those ones you look at and you go, that's not going to weigh that much. You put it on, and you're like, it always weighs.
Yeah,
it's got a lot of oil, which is one of that kind of, honestly, Gorilla Glue, and I've grown that since like 2015. It's one of the ones that really helped solidify my opinion that, oil is in fact, truly is in fact, weighs more than plant matter. Because I was always looking at that going, what the hell? It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be, shouldn't be weighing that much, but alas, it does. Right. Ooh, so I believe this is we don't have this on the line.
No, I'm just checking.
All right, sorry, I was just looking on there, and boy, that does look good.
Yeah, there's a lot of purple in there.
But again, you'll see some color, and I like to post those because you're going to see some color on the Gorilla Glue. Go check it out on Jug Dealers Instagram. You're going to see some color in there that you wouldn't normally be associated with Gorilla Glue.
Yeah.
And I never got those colors out. I started growing this strain previous to being with New Millennium and having winter frost.
Green finisher.
So it's been pretty green finisher.
I grew it for a long time. It never looked like
looked like that, did it? All right. Well, so there you have it, folks.
There you go.
Gorilla Glue, again, it's about a 9 to 10 weeker with our lovely friend, again, Winter Frost. We can take that down. I usually take about 8.5 up to 9. I usually don't have to take it to that 10. But go check it out, man. Got some good pictures of it, both finishing and mid-run. I love that knuckly, just fat kind of speary look. It's a lovely one. Okay, let's talk about our travel, right? So as we've been saying, I will be in Florida here starting very soon. I'll be there for the February 3rd customer day. Gabe is going to be on the East Coast after that, which I year running from Maryland all the way up to Maine, February 7th to 15th. Shout us out if you guys want us to stop by commercial facilities. We're going to be hitting shops as well. So if there's any shops or commercial facilities, please reach out to the Jug Dealers Instagram, shoot us a DM, and we'll do our best to stop by. Gabe's got a lot of good time and some flexibility that, so you'll be seeing him out there.
Fill up, but
Yeah. So shout us out. We'll do what we can to get you there. And then as we have our trips coming up, we've got some NorCal, some SoCal, some Michigan. We've got some other trips that are coming up. So as we get them finalized, we'll be talking to you guys about them for sure. Suggested reading. You want to take that away real quick there, Gabe?
So we have The Hidden Half of Nature, The Microbial Roots of Life and Health. This book is by David Montgomery and Ann Bickle.
Yeah, Ann Bickle. I believe there's it's an E with a Tyndall. Anyway, a Bickle. I don't know. Anyway, so I don't. I speak
unloud or
there's a thingy, there.
Yeah.
So I'll read real quick just and this is a little bit longer of a summary, but honestly, there was so much. Normally I cut a bunch of this crap out, but it just was quite good. So, okay, it's a riveting exploration of how microbes are transforming the way we see nature and ourselves, and could revolutionize agriculture and medicine. Prepare to set aside what you think you know about yourself and microbes. Good health for people and for plants depends on Earth's smallest creatures. The Hidden Half of Nature tells the story of our tangled relationship with microbes and their potential to revolutionize agriculture and medicine from garden to gut. We'll leave it at there. It's got a little bit longer explanation, but pull it up on Amazon, take a look at it. Man, I just thought it was cool because it also went into, it's not just about what's under your feet. And again, that's the hidden half of nature, right? So it's talking about, some soil science stuff, but all the microbes that are literally on the bottom half that we don't see, but how that's ultimately tied to our gut and to health. And, we try and keep things very educational here as much as possible.
That's why so many people have problems today with Crohn's and diverticulitis.
Well, and even, things with like gluten allergies and things like that. And that's, really related to more to fast drying grains and not allowing that germination and glyphosate. And, talk about a tangled web. So anyway, we do like to kind of keep putting out these interesting readings. I know we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. Really, it's just kind of a section where we like to say, hey, here's some interesting thing if you want to read it.
Check this out. Here's something that,
So more importantly, let's talk about the ski report. For those who don't know, and in fact, the whole country's been bitterly cold. It has been incredibly cold. It was 15 below
Brownsville,
overnight.
Texas.
Yeah, it was. I think at Bo's place it was something like literally 45 below.
Here's the thing. We're used to it. We see cold, it's those places I got people I know down south that don't have heat in their homes. And it's not because
Right.
they couldn't afford heat. It's because it doesn't get cold.
Doesn't get cold. They
You know what I
didn't
mean?
put that
so
in.
it's definitely interesting to see it stretch so far south. But
Yeah.
we got a lot of snow.
We got a lot of snow. The mountains have been getting absolutely pounded. Multiple feet have fallen at Wolf Creek since I was there. I think it was at about 70 inches when I was there. Or sorry, it was like 80 inches. Now it's at 152. So they picked up, over 70 inches since I was there. I think you mentioned we're supposed to have another, when you get that jet stream to drop down and really put that trough, is what I have to call it, into the four corners. And that's typically where you get the El Nino getting hit. But as you mentioned, Steamboat got like 61.
Got the most. Yeah, 51. 51. They got the most. They got the most out of anybody in that last storm. But I can tell you, I drove from So the funny part was I stayed in Leadville Sunday night, and then Monday my buddy calls me and he goes, he's a teacher there, and he goes, they just closed school for the third time in 20 years.
Wow.
And so when Leadville's closing schools,
it's pretty nasty.
I mean, I can tell you, I drove from Leadville to Minturn on Sunday, and that drive was bananas.
Well, and I know you've been hitting some great stuff. I know you were out with Gene before. I think you've been out with him again. Caught some new stuff.
Yeah, he was in this weekend.
Caught some new stuff in some and Vale counties. So it's been up and down. We like to keep that, try and stay relevant. It is ski season, so talk a little bit about the ski report. I think both of us have been having a good time.
And hopefully some people are getting out there and enjoying it.
Yes, please do. Get out there.
Even the East Coast just got snow.
Even the East Coast.
So
yeah. let's finish everything up with talking about our listener interaction. So we are going to do an entire show on questions alone that will be coming up. We've been having a lot of people that have been interacting both on YouTube and Instagram. So we're just going to dedicate a whole show to it. So I don't have any listener interaction questions for this show, although please, this is, a call to action, if you will, a CTA, as I've been told. Please, if you've got those questions, post them up. We want to continue to have this be a good section of the show. But far as supporter shout outs, Gabe, what do we got?
We got Northern Light Kind off of YouTube. We got Cannabinoid, who is
Ben. Isn't that Cannabinoid?
Yeah,
I saw that there.
He does all kinds of cool stuff. He's running NewMill, and he's a tester for Colin.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for Ethos.
For Ethos. But he's always got killer gear. He's got some cool YouTube videos that he does for like the little guy.
Nice.
So yeah, Ben's the man. And then I Need Money.
$2.99. Hey, thank you for interacting. That was one that we picked out. We see you people that are interacting with us. That's not somebody that I've interacted with personally, but you've making those comments. We try and look at that. We try and see people who are interacting that we haven't had a chance to shout out before. So this week, I Need Money, $2.99.
I need money.
I know.
Yeah, I read every single comment, and if there's ones that are important, I send them right over to Gabe and Jaron. So yeah, hit us up. I'll be posting on Instagram and Ask Us Anything, and then the YouTube community page. You can check our community page, or it just comes up in your feed. You guys will see it.
And then we got the shop shout outs. We got Sustainable Hog.
Yep.
Out in the Western Slope.
Which you will be out there.
Yeah, I'll be out there next week. Actually, I'll be out there probably when the show drops. So, and then they're out in, I think, Parachute and Junction, and
sounds
then IGS and Glenwood. Those guys are the homies. We appreciate
Indoor Garden Store. They've been there a long time. They're still holding it down. Last but not least, Delhi/Olides. So that's two different stores, but they are connected. They're out in Modesto area, California. I was just out there last week. They've got Winter Frost on the shelf. They will have many more New Millennium products coming up on the shelf. We've got a new order that's going out to them. Thank you guys for the support. We'll be sending hats. We'll be sending shirts. We'll be sending samples. If you guys know who that is, Delhi or Olides out there in the Modesto area. Okay, we're about done here.
On the Nug Shots, if I could bring up one thing about that. You guys are so nice. You guys tag 5.8 and New Millennium in all your posts. If you guys do tag New Millennium, go ahead and tag Jug Dealers too. NewMill, we don't have a chance to post everything, but at Jug Dealers, we'll post almost every single thing. So if you tag us, I will put it in our stories.
And we want to start bringing that up as well. We want to not only give you the support on our Instagram, but then we want to talk about them on here. We'll keep the pictures on there, but we'll talk about the review on here. So if you got some good Nug Shots, please send it out. Last but not least, Gabe, what do we got to give away this week, bud?
This week, we are giving away more Slicium. Anybody who's, we're giving away 100s or 250s?
We only have
250s right now. I know. I think we said 500. Sometimes we sent double.
250s sold.
250s.
Anybody interested in the mag cow? So that's our cow mag.
Yes.
You can see a 250 right above Gabe's shoulder right there. You can spot it right there, right over your right shoulder. That's the 250.
And then we've got the mag cal here as well. So anybody interested in a new cal mag option, right?
It is the most concentrated.
It is the most concentrated
on the market.
at 2 mils a gallon. It's 0.4 EC, which is the same strength as the most popular ones, such as, the one with the tomatoes on it, is at 5 mils a gallon. So it's straightforward, baby. It's a 200. It's nothing. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just trying to save you guys some money. It's the same pricing, but it's over twice as strong. Come and get it. Last but not least, of course, the IPM Trio. So it is the EcoWorks we were talking about, that 100% virgin neem-based cold pressed deliciousness.
Little tip when you guys get that stuff too, maybe a little waxy on top, depending.
Keep it warm.
You're just going to want to take it, run it under some warm water. That stuff will be back to viscous.
You look
and no
at
problem.
it has like little balls and you're like, what the hell? It's all waxy. As Gabe says, run a little warm water. You'll look and you go, oh, now it's perfectly viscous. It's all back.
Pro tip.
Okay. The multi as well, right here. Bing, 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 bing. Right. We'll be giving that away. We'll be giving this away in a trio.
And it'll also be available for purchase very soon at jugdealers.net, you guys.
So
pretty cool.
We've got all this stuff that's available. Thank you guys so much for listening. The show actually went a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but hey, no worries there. Hope you guys stuck around with us. If not, no worries. We'll see you next time around. Please reach out anything through the Jug Dealers DMs. We're going to get you the products.
Commercial growers, reach out. We want
commercial growers. We want you. We want to tour your facilities. Thank you guys so much for listening. Gabe, thank you for being the best host a guy could ask for. Grambo, appreciate you being man behind Mike. Till next time from the Jug Den, we will see you soon.